Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Sunday Servings. This is Dr. Vishal Chhabra, President of Delhi Psychiatric Society. And I've tried my presidency to start some academic activities for the DPS. This is one of them, to take some time out on Sunday morning, having breakfast or just after breakfast, some time, and we discuss some important academic topics which we otherwise find it difficult to, because you have to wait for the conferences. You don't have to do that. So in this is the 5th edition of Sunday Servings, and today the topic is child sexual abuse, clinical and legal aspects. And we have an excellent speakers and also a very, very distinguished chairperson, especially Dr. Savita ma'am, who's joined all the way from Chandigarh after her excellent PGI meet, alumni meet. So over to Manushri for carrying on the proceedings. And
Thank you.
a few housekeeping notes before I give it. Please put your names, whoever is joining, because sometimes there's a mobile phone. This is somebody's iPhone is returned, somebody's VRD is returned, somebody's JK is returned. So please put your full name so that we know who is joining us, so that we can also get back to you. Somebody is OnePlus. So please put your names instead of the phone names or the short names. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Manush.
Thank you, Dr. Vishal, for the wonderful beginning today. And Sunday Servings is in its 5th iteration today. And it was the online programs that we are seeing so often these days was one of the few good things that came out of the COVID pandemic. And we have tried to take the best out of it and choose some very important and pertinent topics. We have not been very frequent with Sunday Servings that we
Hello. Hello.
I request you to please mute yourself. Request all the participants to mute themselves. Thank you. This is the 5th iteration. We have had very wonderfully participant targeted Sunday Servings till now. And we have chosen topics about, we got the feedback from the PGs, the residents and the faculty members who have joined. So today's topic is something that has come out of our experience at Safdarjung. So Dr. Pankaj Verma had this idea, our head at Safdarjung and MMC, about telling the participants and the DPS members about the child sexual abuse and the clinical and legal aspects. This topic has been discussed often in the past, but often we forget it in the midst of all the hustle bustle of life. This is very important because we have cases that we see frequently at Safdarjung and I'm sure at other hospitals too. When we are at a seat, when we encounter such cases, what to do, we are still not sure. So welcome to this 5th iteration of the DPS Sunday Servings. Now I'll introduce our chairpersons for the day. And who better than Dr. Savita Malhotra to head this chairperson's panel today. Madam is a distinguished head, former dean of PGI Chandigarh. She has had important research published, I think, in most of the topics that we have read as postgraduate residents, but more importantly in areas of acute psychosis, in child psychiatry. And Madam has been the pioneer in research in child psychiatry. So welcome ma'am, Dr. Savita Malhotra. Our next chairperson for the day is Dr. Pankaj Verma. He is the professor and head at Vardhaman Mahavir Medical College and Safdarjung Hospital. Sir has had more than 20 years of experience in psychiatry, and his special areas of interest include child psychiatry and sexual psychiatry. He runs an independent clinic in psychosexual and marital wellness at Safdarjung. So welcome, sir, to you.
Thank you.
Third equally distinguished chair for the day is Dr. Naresh Nebinani, who was actually one of the chosen speakers for the day. Dr. Naresh is also the professor and head at AIIMS, Jodhpur, and he has distinguished himself with publishing of various papers in child psychiatry. So welcome, Dr. Naresh Nebinani. He was kind enough to join us. He's traveling today and he has joined us from the airport. So thank you so much, Dr. Nilesh, for joining today. And I'll hand
Thank you
over
very
to
much,
the
Dr. Manushree. Yeah, and the team,
Thank you.
DPS.
Thank you. So I'll hand over the session to our chair, Madam Savita, and the others for carrying out the session, Madam. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My grateful thanks to Dr. Vishal Chabda, President, Dr. Pankaj, Vice President, Dr. Manushree, Secretary for the Delhi Psychiatric Society for inviting me over for this Sunday morning session. And I am very pleased to co-chair this session with Dr. Pankaj Verma and with dear Dr. Naresh Nabinani. And today's topic is child sexual abuse. And there are two speakers, Dr. Aparna Goyal and Dr. Prerna. And they are going to speak on clinical and legal aspects. And Dr. Aparna Goyal will cover clinical and legal aspects, and Dr. Prerna will focus more on management issues. We all know that the child sex abuse is a very complex issue. It's not just a clinical or psychiatric or a issue. It's also a medical issue. It's also a social issue. It's a legal issue. And with the vast amount of complexity involved and the sensitivity that is involved in handling these cases, it becomes extremely difficult for psychiatrists to really, understand and manage them. And this requires a great amount of skill and sensitivity to handle these cases. And we are seeing more and more about these child sex abuse as a problem. POSCO, the prevention of protection of children from sexual offenses. Now, POSCO, that's an act that came up in 2012. And so that brought in focus all this. Of course, the sexual offenses against children have been going on for ages and all this centuries. But the special and specific act for protection, legal protection, came up in 2012. And ever since, I think we have to see, how far and how much are we better off or have been able to handle and take care of those children who have suffered these sexual offenses. Law enactment is one thing, its implementation is another, and third aspect is whether this law
Madam, there is a link problem. We cannot hear you.
Madam, meanwhile, you can switch off the camera because there's network issue at your end.
to assist the legal process in finalizing or leading to a conclusion about the criminal proceedings that ensue after such a case that comes up. And so psychiatrist has a multifarious role, and we need to take care of that. I do have the CV of Dr. Aparna. Aparna, you are going to be the first speaker. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Will be the first speaker, and Prerna
Yes.
will be the second speaker, and you will take about something like 25 to 30 minutes, not more.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Yeah. And before I will introduce you and then ask my co-chairs if they would like to make any opening comments, and then move further. I'm going for my screen share showing Aparna's CV. Can you enable my screen share, please? My screen share is disabled.
Yes, Dr. Vishal, please.
Mute her. Sorry, try now.
Yeah. Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, it's a little dark background. So Dr. Aparna Goyal is assistant professor in IHBAS, Department of Psychiatry, areas of interest: child psychiatry, women mental health and perinatal psychiatry, and training and experience. What happened? End of slideshow.
Just go back, ma'am. Ma'am, नीचे जो है ना arrow left side में. हाँ,
Yeah.
this one. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So she has a specialty. Okay, she has had training at multiple places, and she has more than 30 publications and is a reviewer for many international national journals, and involved in training of counselors, medical officers, public health nurses. She had also 10 days in-person training in Samvad Nimhans. Samvad Nimhans is in a very major and big way working in this area of child protection, and has received Best Poster Award and many other recognitions in several conferences. So, Aparna, this is, you are welcome to this session, and say, stop share. Okay. And before I call upon you, and I would request Dr. Pankaj Verma and Dr. Naresh Navinani, if you would want to make any opening comments, please.
Namaskar. Good morning to all. It is a privilege to be a co-chair with Professor Dr. Savita Malhotra, ma'am. Namaskar. This all started when I attended PGDP at Kota, and I was talking to Dr. Majid while Dr. Naresh Nemdani was presenting this wonderful CME on child sexual abuse. I realized that day in and day out, we are facing this problem. And, when the patient comes, every doctor is not aware what to do. So I started requesting Dr. Naresh that he should speak here also. He was very kind enough to accept it, but as you know, he's very busy. I think this matter was later on taken up by DPS, and all thanks to Dr. Vishal, Dr. Manushi, and Dr. Pankaj, that they were kind enough. And I think Dr. Aparna and Dr. Prerna, they have done it earlier also, and it was on the recommendation of Dr. Naresh only. So I think we are going to get enriched with. See, we all know the act is there, but the implementation, as the madam said, that is the major part. So I think after attending this, most of the doctors will have this clarity in their mind. When such cases come, what should we do? So I thank DPS, Dr. Naresh and Dr. Savita Malhotra ma'am for such a good initiative. Thank you.
In the just
Naresh?
brief, yes, yeah, hope I'm audible. In brief, it is really a pleasure to be with DPS on DPS platform today. Thanks to Dr. Pankaj to initiate this all interaction and the DPS to give us the platform. And a special thanks to Samvad, because me and Dr. Aparna are colleagues there, though we know from Rohtak days to each other. And last year, it was a wonderful session by Dr. Aparna and Dr. Prerna. That's why I was willing that they are the better speaker as a team. And they are actually seeing such cases at IHBAS much greater in the number than any other institution, especially central government institution. And just for the people who are attending, this is Dr. Shekhar Sheshadri's words in the Samvad, which most of us don't know, that only can all the participants please mute themselves, or the host please take care of that. That only 3% people cases are reported, and majority are not getting convicted because of poor legal framework, but we are documenting. So, and most of are not getting clinical attention for therapies. So it's a day to all of us to understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Naresh. And thank you, Chase. Now request Dr. Aparna to please begin your session, please. Dr. Vishal, can you please enable the question? You're not audible.
I've already allowed, Dr.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, now.
So is the screen visible?
Yes.
Yes, it's clearly visible, Dr. Panna. And I, just a minute, I request all the participants to please maintain the decorum of the house and mute yourself during the session. Please ask your questions in the chat box or at the end during the interaction.
Another way I can mute everyone and unmute. I mean, I will not allow anyone to unmute themselves. Let me put it that way. So she will stay unmute, but everybody else will be muted. So I think let's start that. Go ahead, Dr. Pan.
Okay.
So good morning, everyone. I'm very thankful to the Delhi Psychiatric Society for giving me this opportunity and humbled to be in the presence of such eminent dignitaries. I'm still young at this and still learning. And at IHBAS, as Dr. Naresh has said, we get a lot of cases and we get stuck, and we still get stuck at a lot of places. So hope with this present session, I'm able to give some insights that we see, as well as enhance with the interaction that we may have at the later end. So I'll be very brief because when we talk about child sexual abuse, it's a major public health and social and legal concern, as ma'am has already said. And probably one session is not enough to cover everything, as has already been when we went to Samvad, the 10 days was not enough. So I'll go about briefly touching about the legal and the clinical aspects. It's not moving.
Can you change the slide?
Yeah, that's what is the issue. I'm not able to change the slide.
Try it out again.
Done. Not.
There must be.
I'll
Check
just do the stop share and do it again.
Okay, please do that. Now it is visible in the trial left bottom. Left bottom, there is a, yeah, here I think that I saw, you can't?
So I can't see that.
Try page up and down.
Done that. I'll put in the small one. I'll try the other one. Okay.
Yeah.
In this I can try.
So there is
Okay.
there is this one, this indication. So this is not working. ये जो ऊपर आपके है,
So
this
is
slide.
this changing now, but it will not show the full screen?
And
now it is doing.
yeah.
Is it happening there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start with a brief a few case scenarios that we had experienced. We can discuss them later on also. So there was Miss A, 16-year-old female studying a student of 9th standard. She presented with withdrawn behavior, reduced interaction, disturbed sleep, and decreased appetite, impaired self-care since 5 months, associated with episodes of ghabrat, fearfulness, especially scared of staying alone at home. Symptoms improved once she moved to grandparents and heightened again when she was back. On mental state, appearance and behavior was fidgety and restless. Effect was anxious, low speech productivity. There was history of alleged sexual assault by a neighbor in the form of touching inappropriately and forcing himself upon her multiple number of times initially when she was alone at home, and then even when someone else was at the home. So child was allegedly threatened by the neighbor about the dire consequences if she tells anyone about the incidents. In this case, the parents were informed as they were not known to the issue. After taking the child into confidence, concerns and fears of their family were discussed. Sessions were taken focusing on processing intense emotions associated with abuse and assertiveness training, and mandatory reporting was done. That's case one scenario. Another case, 14-year-old female, low socioeconomic status, not educated, history of aggressive behavior, suspiciousness, muttering to self, disturbed sleep, appetite for 20 days, and associated with wandering behavior, which led to one of them when one such occasion, she was found in disheveled and disorganized state by the brother and a few men running away, and patient reported that bad behavior by those men. No significant findings, and they refused. Patient was uncooperative for examination. Parents refused consent. for gynecological examination. Patient MSC, unkempt in appearance, hypervigilant, delusion of persecution, third person auditory hallucination, as well as impaired social and test judgment. Diagnosis of acute psychosis was made. Patient was treated with antipsychotics. Patient remained consistent about the abuse event even after the symptom resolution. Parents were counseled for legal action and mandatory reporting was done. The third case scenario, a 12-year-old boy, 6th standard education, with complaints of irritability, anger outbursts, decline in scholastic performance, and school refusal since 3 years. Apparently well till 3 years back, when he was allegedly sexually abused by a peon in the school and was threatened to be pushed from a building if he tells this to someone. His classmates somehow came to know about the incidents, would tease and bully him. Since then, he has been irritable over siblings, get engaged in frequent fights at school, and started losing interest in studies. Avoided sitting in class, poor performance in exams, and from 1 year he had stopped going to school. He stopped helping even in the usual chores and had started wandering in the locality, was seen with the older boys. Findings were anxious, preoccupation with past incidences of abuse, distressed about the incidences. Intelligence was found to be below average and refused to tell his parents and others. Rapport building was done, safety of the patient was ensured, reasons for disclosure were explored, behavior therapy was initiated, legal provisions were explained, and mandatory reporting was done. So in all this, this is unknown and known. Perpetrators can be anyone. It is not that only the unknown people can do it. Mental illness, mental retardation, they are usually ignored because they are vulnerable, but they are vulnerable, more vulnerable actually. It's considered that victims are usually females, but the boys can be victim too. And safety and legal considerations have to be taken in. So if I go about the layout, I have already discussed the case scenarios. I'll be talking about child sexual abuse, its definition, prevalence, and impact. Then to talk about the legal framework and the clinical approach, and the mandatory reporting and its issues. So child sexual abuse is involvement of a child in sexual activity that he or she does not fully comprehend, is unable to give informed consent to, or for which the child is not developmentally prepared and cannot give consent, or that violate the laws or social taboos of society. The dimensions, as we've also seen, that it can be non-contact type of abuse. It can be non-contact versus contact. So inappropriate gestures, inappropriate intent, and then touch. Then it can be non-genital versus genital, and non-penetrative versus penetrative. The number of episodes, we cannot just say that it's a single episode, it has happened once, but it can be a multiple times repeated, and it can be there. Perpetrator of abuse, known versus known, and one which is now hampering our society, or which is now which is going to be a problem, is digital. So with the advance, with the AI in the picture, and with the technology being advanced, our digital system has been developing, and the children are getting. So we are even discussing about online addiction, social addictions, and that are very, very common areas where cyber crime, the sexual abuse can happen in the form. So magnitude of problem, if I discuss, globally it has been reported that 11% of girls and 4% of boys have been found to have child sexual abuse. As per WHO report, 150 million girls, 73 million boys. When we come to India, it is UNICEF survey has reported 10% girls between 10 to 14 years of age have reported, 30% girls between 15 to 19 years of age, and 42% girls before their teenage. Ministry of Women and Child Development in their survey reported that 53% of CSA has been reported, and actually a major 50% had reported to be boys. And NCRB report has that of the crimes that were reported against children, 36% of them were under POSCO Act. So that's a very huge number, and as Dr. Naresh said, that out of these, only very less gets completed under those acts. So 1 in 6 boys experience some form of sexual abuse before they turn 18, and 1 in 4 girls experience some form of sexual abuse before they turn 30. Now, if we see about this, there is the perpetrator. So the form of sexual abuse, the prevalence, the gender-wise distribution, and perpetrator mostly it's someone known, and it is not disclosed most of the time. So there are a lot of social and the issues that can be probably the reason behind that, which is said. And to highlight the issue, if we see the digital or the technology that has been pornographic material exposed to child about 30%, which is supposedly the highest among the form of sexual abuse, and mostly by a friend. So among the child victims, as we have already said, mostly it's the family. Now, when we talk about the impact of the child sexual abuse, there are psychological, physical, behavioral, and interpersonal. So when we talk about psychological, it is low self-esteem, anger, hostility, depression, anxiety, guilt, body image concerns, self-harm attempts, effect on cognitive and emotional development. When we talk about physical, we have bleeding for vagina, urinary tract infections, menstrual irregularities, sexually transmitted diseases, genital injury, and medically unexplained body aches that have been seen. Behavioral, we have seen that the children get involved into more of get involved into wrong in the peer influences. There is violation of laws. This social conduct gets disturbed, lower academic performances, refusal to school, leading to again the impact of the school refusal. Then bedwetting and sexualized behavior at times is seen. Interpersonal communication problems with the family, especially if it's the perpetrator within the family, insecure relations because your trust issues have been, trust has been broken at the time, reduced social competence and lack of trust. It has also been shown that effect of CSA has made an impact on our brain, and there is thinning of the somatosensory cortex, and the areas that are mainly affected are the thalamus and the ventral prefrontal cortex and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, where it is reported to have an impact of child sexual abuse. So before we go to the legal, the clinical, we have legal provision. So earlier we talk about that child sexual abuse does not, there's no laws for the protection of children. There's no law to protect this. So before we reach to POSCO 2012, we had right to protection from trafficking, forced labor, and exploitation act. And then we have the JJ Act, which was amended in 2021, but before that we had it in 2000. And we had even developed the child protection scheme, the child and where we can call. So the recent POSCO with an amendment in 2019 has been brought into picture by the government so as to help the children under the child sexual abuse. So what are the key provisions in POSCO's child is any person below the age of 18. It criminalizes sexual activity with children. The act very specifically has gender neutral. So it's not the boys are the perpetrators and girls the victims. It means that both the boys and girls may be victims. The offender can also be of any sex. CSA is any kind of sexual contact between an adult and a child, or between an older child and a younger child. There are four main types of offenses and punishment which have been defined under POSCO: penetrative, sexual assault, sexual harassment, using a child for pornographic purposes, or storing pornographic material. So any person, what is very relevant to us is that any person who believes that an offense under POSCO may be committed or knows that it has been committed has to report the matter. And the matter has to be reported to the police or the SJPU, which is the Special Juvenile Police Unit. So this is the area where we all actually get issues. So how to do that, where to do that, when to do that. So there is no exact timeline of reporting, but yes, if we come to know, we have to immediately inform. That is what the law says. Informing the police is and the FIR is filed. The child can be admitted to a hospital or shelter home or with the family if it is safe. Police informs the CWC or SPJO within 24 hours, and the child statement is recorded, the charge sheet is filed, and trial has to commence. And it has been said that the POSCO cases are supposed to be within 1 year, should be seen and done, but that's not the case in our practical situations. Now, what are the issues with the act? So there is a positive outcome. There are legal implications which has enforced child protection, it has brought a little bit of awareness among the people. Special and sensitive codes. So special codes are designed where the child does not has to see the perpetrator, child does not come into contact with the perpetrator. The direct questioning is not there, but that doesn't happen every time. Sensitive concerns were seen and vulnerable like those under protection with severe implications. But negative is there's an age of 18 years has been put up, and mandatory reporting versus confidentiality dilemma, and ambiguous definitions at places like intent. And we are still struggling with juvenile relationship. If both the kids, it's a consensual romantic relationship, who is the victim or the perpetrator, and what is the impact? So most of the time it is the boys who are taken in and said that they are in the relationship, but they are under POSCO, and the impact on that child who had been in a romantic relationship but has been taken in under JJ Act. There are issues with JJ Act and Marriage Act. The Hindu Marriage Act or the Act allows consensual intercourse less than 18 years, but again, it is in contrast to the POSCO, and POSCO wins. Re-victimization due to multiple appearance. So those special codes have been designed, but not everywhere and not everything. So there are times when child has to ultimately go again and give the statements, which has been tried to reduce it, but it is not happening in the practical possibility. And 18 years is the time clock of maturity. So 18 years, 12 o'clock, the child becomes mature enough and does not. So this is something which is very diabolical, and probably has the issues which are right now we are all are facing with our children who come with sexual abuse. So coming to clinical context of consultation, index of suspicion for children should always be high. So patients or the children can present with symptom patterns, sudden onset of bedwetting, aches, pains, and general ill health. Then there is sudden unexplained change in behavior, school refusal, people avoidance, symptoms of depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, sexualized behavior, clear hints given by the child, detection of pregnancy, sexual transmitted infections, genital injuries, and obviously disclosure by the child. So when the child, you come to have a child who has had reported child sexual abuse, emergency medical care has to be done. There's no document needed for that. You can provide that. Treatment for physical injuries, exposure to STDs has to be done, and a prophylactic treatment if needed has to be given. Referral for any de-addiction or mental health services. So psychological first aid has to be given. The examination should be conducted in the presence of a person whom the child trusts, because there will be a lot of issues with the child. So doctor can only examine, and if the victim is a girl child, female doctor or examination in presence of women should be done. Now, what are the steps that we have to take the consent? We have to provide first aid and history. History is very, very important, and probably we all are psychiatrist and we all know that history is the key for everything. So detailed history and then examination. Evidence collection, though not exactly our part of purview, but this has to be done very precisely, very concisely, and it has to follow the chain. To dry, pack, and seal and hand over to the police. For examination, we have to look into the dental, physical, and radiological examination for age estimation, as well as for other physical examination for gynecological exposure to STDs. Treatment appropriate to that for like STD test and prophylaxis, HIV test, emergency contraception, UPT, counseling, information, and reference to other services. And documentation is very important. So I guess most of the things we do, but where we have to actually focus is that history and documentation, two things is very, very important in such cases. So immediate effects of CSA is basically sometimes child comes in shock, dissociation, confusion, guilt, fear, phobias, and hypervigilance. However, if it's a single episode and the child is not disclosed, there are other effects also, and probably with the duration and sometimes long-term effects of the CSA. Altered self-perception, body image issues at school, learning problems, behavioral problems, sleep disturbances, age-inappropriate sexual behavior, conduct problems, aggression, substance abuse, even prostitution, and social dysfunction. And a long-term impact of CS is anxiety disorders, eating disorders, depression, suicide, parasuicide, schizophrenia and delusion disorders, antisocial borderline personality disorders, substance use, adjustment problems, intimacy issues, and interpersonal problems. So in all this, when we look at the clinical approach, we actually go through context to behavior. So in this, from the context is basically the background where actually the abuse took place. So abuse can take place in all settings, at home, at school, in the community. And perpetrators, as we've already said, that it is the people that child knows. The perpetrator builds trust with the child to prevent disclosure. At times, threats are used to ensure silence. One of the very I won't say it's a new thing, but grooming has been built up nowadays. So a child is living in a community, there is a neighbor who lives, he's a helper in the home, he tries to build interaction with that child. The child is feels safe and secure with the person, and then he shows interest in the child, he shows romantic relationship, and he says, I will marry you. And then the child runs away with the concerned person, and then they're trafficked. So there is the whole process of grooming that has been done, where child understands that she's in love with that person, and the other person is actually have a different purpose and or intent in the mind. So this is something which has been of late. I have seen a few cases on that, and is quite an issue that is the society is facing. So there are other ways where a child, the context is inducement in here, where they will give offer children something like a pencil or a chocolate or a rubber, and there is coercion and threat, that they will threat that it will harm you or will harm your family. Transmission of misconceptions about sexual behaviors and norms, and blaming the victim. This is all your fault. You have dressed like this. You are like this. You should be doing this. So this is something which has been, so this is the background. This is the context. And the child tends to feel a sense of guilt, confusion, betrayal, powerlessness, and a fear as a consequence. So when we tries to understand the clinical context in the child, we need to understand what was the context, what was the setting that was there, what was the family context. The family is a single parent. It is a child has been abandoned. There's neglect from the family, or there is any other spaces that has been invaded of the child. Then child's experience in this background of the context, happy, difficult, traumatic, there is another forms of abuses are present there, and the impact on the child. So that will help us how to manage a child and its emotion and behavioral problems to the next level. So when we talk about the whole clinical context, we need to look into this format, where we look into the context, the experience, the child's inner voice. So child will think, I am not good, it is my fault, I am the one who has to be blamed, I am unworthy, or I'm not good to anything, he's the only one who loves me. So this is the child's inner voice. What will people say? They will blame me. So when we connect it with the emotions, they will feel anxious, they will feel sad, they will feel angry, and that will lead to the behaviors of bedwetting, isolation, refusal, abuse, or in anger and irritation, which we actually see. So this is how we actually can go for identifying and going through the clinical approach. And the reverse can also happen. So when we have the context to behavior, however, we can also lead back from behavior with emotion to inner voice, to experience, and to context. So this was more on the clinical approach, how we go about it. If you're able to identify a diagnosis of a depression or suicide, for pharmacological management we can do, while the non-pharmacological management, which is primarily the trauma-focused therapy and the therapies that are needed, Dr. Prerna will be talking about it in the next. I'll just touch upon lastly on the mandatory reporting and the issues regarding it. So this is one area I think we all, when it comes to clinical approaches, we might be feeling a little confident on that. But when it comes to mandatory reporting, we are stuck at various places. One is, should we and should we not? So mandatory reporting law says legal and ethical bias basis. Consequences of non-reporting is that you will have penalties for service providers. Then dilemma and challenges of service providers in reporting. Consequences of reporting for children, cessation of abuse, healing and recovery. But if you do not, if you do without the consent or without, you lose the therapeutic uh, platform that you have established with the child. So issues of children's content. Now, when we reported issues of children's consent based on age, developmental ability, mental health status, children rights to participation and decision making has to be considered, and barriers to disclosure and reporting should be examined. So, for an example, there was a 7-year male child informs about sexual abuse but requests it to be a secret. Now, that's a child's right to confidentiality. However, he is of an age where his consent, his participation is equally important but may not be valid. So, once you say no, you have to do it, there's a dilemma to lose the therapeutic relationship if the confidentiality is breached. But it is your legal duty to inform and ethical responsibility to prevent more harm to the child. So when we actually deal with that, we can actually try acknowledge that it is difficult from the child, acknowledge that it is difficult to talk about it, regard it as a positive step that he has come out and reported the abuse. So he has been brave enough to interact and tell us about it. Ask the child how he or feels having disclosed the abuse issue. So checking onto his emotions. Has he told and about anyone, and what response was received? So sometimes their emotions and the issues and disclosure are because nobody has actually cared, or they had said that you are actually manipulating or you are making all nonsense. So help the understand, and the child also has the guilt that this is your fault. So help the child to understand that abuse was not their fault. But also, safety first, must check for any ongoing abuse and has to act accordingly for that. Discuss the safety concerns. So child also has to explain, should be explained, he should be involved in the participation in the decision making and explain what you do plan to do next is to help him or her from feeling powerless. The next appropriate step would be to inform the parents and then the concerned authorities, and psychological education on safe, unsafe touches, feeling, thoughts, and behavior, healthy coping techniques. Now, when we tell it to the parents, the same the issues come. So how to explore the reasons from the child for non-disclosure, address the fears. So it might be that the parents had not shown an interest and there might be a reason. So you have to find out that and then first address that to the child and then to the parents. Help them understand, the parents, that this is all for your child's protection only, and assure as far as possible nature and extent of disclosure will be in a way most comfortable to the child. With consent of child, inform the parents, preferably in presence of child. Once they have the child has been informed and you've spoken to the parents, inform the child about your duty to inform. If the child refuses, it is prudent to override confidentiality over child's safety. Now, from the parents, there'll be a lot of emotional responses, and I am very sure whoever has dealt with has had this experiences. There is denial to minimalization to falsification, especially if the family member is involved as a perpetrator. Then there is distress, numbness, shame, guilt, anger. So respond always in a professional and objective manner without displaying your judgment or your response to that is anger, shock, or guilt, which you feel at times. Inform
Dr.
about.
Aparna,
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Aparna,
Yes,
yeah, okay, can you
Yes, ma'am.
wind up quickly? Can you wind up in
Yes,
next
ma'am.
5 minutes? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely, ma'am.
Thank you.
Inform about the limitations of confidentiality and professional obligations to inform legal agencies, and be prepared that parent may never bring back the child, may ask the child even to take back the complaint. So POSCO is mandatory reporting of sexual offenses. Failure to do this would result in imprisonment of up to 6 months with or without fine. We are not expected to investigate the matter or even know the perpetrator. This is the role of the police to investigate, and no legal obligation to inform parents or child, but it is always a good practice to inform. So in conclusion, CSA is still a major public health concern, but still undisclosed and still stigmatized. Legal provisions have helped, but also left many unanswered questions, and clinical approach to be precise, sensitive, empathetic, and non-judgmental. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Aparna. This was very educative and informative. I think what we can do is we have the second presentation also, and then can have question answers in the end together.
Yeah, can you, Dr. Aparna,
Yeah.
can you stop the presentation? I think somebody has to introduce the second speaker also.
Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am. आप करेंगे मैम, ठीक है. Dr. Prerna, I'm asking you to unmute.
Our second speaker today is Dr. Prerna Sharma. She's MPhil and PhD in psychology. She's working as Associate Professor of Clinical Psychology at IHBAS, Delhi. And she provides psychological services across diverse populations. And she has worked in mental health research, teaching and training, and it's setting for last 10 years. And she has been the frontline worker during COVID-19 pandemic. And her therapeutic interests are like therapies like acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness, integrated therapy, trauma-informed therapy, compassion-focused therapy, schema therapy, early parenting environment, and so on and so forth. She has various publications in national and international journals, has extensive research experience. She's a professional member of various national bodies, APA Trauma Division, and associate editor of Journal of Child Adolescent Psychiatry. So, Dr. Prerna, welcome. And we are very happy to listen to you. And Prerna is going to talk about interventions in child sexual abuse. We had Dr. Aparna talking about the clinical aspects and the legal aspects. And now we come to the most difficult part, that is the intervention. Dr. Prerna, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible? My screen is enabled?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So thank you for providing me this opportunity, and I can see many senior colleagues and teachers here. So I'll make a humble attempt in discussing the management and intervention. Now, basically my presentation is drawn from the therapeutic understanding and experience, and vicariously drawn from Samvad's learning and the patients themselves. I'll be taking you through the therapeutic aspects, directly dealing with child sexual abuse, and some preventive aspects, and some case vignettes that we have recently experienced in the clinic. So the one interesting thing about child sexual abuse is that until we specifically inquire about such events or it is reported to us, there is no way to know about child sexual abuse. Hence, there is no one symptom that characterizes most sexually abused children. There is no evidence of a single cohesive syndrome resulting from CSA, and the effects of CSAs not only depends upon the event or the incident, and we expect that everyone who has gone through certain incident will be experiencing similar debilitating symptoms, so on and so forth. It also depends on individuals or child's vulnerability and resilience as we know it. Now, what are the certain characteristics or symptoms that we could identify or see, or we could be alerted about in the clinic when CSA is reported or noticed? Let's see. So mostly children re-experience the event through intrusive and repetitive thoughts. Children seldom suffer from visual flashbacks and are more likely to exhibit this re-experience in their drawing, stories, or play. Whatever the worldview, whatever the world the child belongs to, it will express itself in that world. So the re-experiences tends to occur mostly during the relaxing time. Now it has a lot of theory behind it, but if I get an opportunity, we'll discuss it later. But for example, especially at night before they fall asleep or they're watching television, they're basically when their parasympathetic is trying to take over and activate itself during those relaxing times, the re-experiencing happens. Otherwise, they are mostly hypervigilant and alert. There is a lot of repetitive behavior, which is second common symptom in traumatized children. By repetitive behavior, I mean that this is the reenactment. Traumatized children are usually unaware that they are repeating something that is related to the original set of thoughts and feelings about trauma. This is primarily because their system is trying to assimilate that experience and to process it or to keep the emotional distance from it. They sort of revisit it, have that repetitive same set of behaviors or thinking in order to basically normalize it for them. There is also a trauma-specific fear that we can see, fear towards an exclusive stimuli, highly associated with that traumatic event at that particular time. For example, fear of dogs. Some kids may say fear of some unknown monster or a particular red color that can be associated with that particular incident, and they had taken notice of during that. It may cause other symptoms such as avoidance of these particular things. One interesting thing about in fact, not just pertaining to CSA, but any traumatic event and people who experience trauma is the futurelessness. Their time perspective changes. What does it mean is that they develop a tendency to have limited future perspectives and expectations. They seem to live in their lives transiently, having a sense of a foreshortened future, believing that more calamities are likely to occur. So let me just, I can't plan for longer future, which leads to feelings of powerlessness, hopelessness, and loss of control. Children who are suffering from omen type thought may be scared to express their feelings of guilt because they're afraid of being accused or blamed for not taking an action. That's very typical of CSA, is because they feel that my parents would blame me for being present in that moment, at that situation, that place, at that time. So if I express this, I will be blamed. These are certain things to watch out for when we see clinically, sometimes when it is not reported, and if we see these things, it alerts us to inquire about it more. Let's come to assessment. What kind of assessment that is needed for us to, as clinicians, as therapists, to do for CSA is that, first of all, let's establish what was the pre-abuse functioning like, how was the temperament of the child, what was the neurodevelopmental activity, what was the attachment status with primary caregivers, how he was responding then and how the kid is responding now, what are the various risk and protective factors. And sometimes when there is repeated trauma and we understand that the kid is at risk because of the place they are living at or the family they are living in, so that continued risk is there. And what are the social resources the family has, what is the family functioning that we can watch out for, so that we can empower the family or the child accordingly. What are the emotional resources, what is the mental health of non-offending parents? That is very important. We'll discuss it in the case vignette later, why mental health of parents is important. What are the financial resources, accessibility, availability to help the child cope with abusive incidents. So now, factors influencing treatment outcome. Mental health of parents, as I have discussed, family socioeconomic status, parental belief and support, community and cultural factors, there are attributional factors, parental marital conflict, stressful life events, and contextual factors. Now, children may not be completely reliable informant about their own mental state, as their self-awareness or language that they are still developing, as Aparna also touched upon, the functioning of prefrontal lobe, etc. So we use a lot of other therapeutic measures to understand their worldview and their mental state. When we understand CSA, it is more than what it looks like, because the proportion of sexually abused children who present with no detectable symptoms, there's a lot of population which suffers from CSA. However, they are also asymptomatic for some time. Now, what does this mean? Let's explore that. That studies have shown that from 21 to 49% abused children don't have detectable symptoms. They will not come with this chief complaint. Children may be experiencing symptoms which are not measured by investigators or clinicians, which is called sleeper effect. And more serious symptoms do not manifest themselves until a year after even disclosure. I have seen certain cases and I've taken note of a particular case, but because of dearth of time, I'll not go into that detail of that case. But sleeper effect is very much present. Asymptomatic children may represent a particularly resilient group that copes well and never shows symptoms. But sometimes the re-experiencing can happen much later and also in adult life sometime. So, what should be done with asymptomatic children? As we understand that it requires a lot of sensitivity to handle that, and we should immediately do something about CSA. But what about kids or even adults coming in who express that they were abused as children, but they do not want to address that particular problem, or they remain asymptomatic sexual abuse but show no immediate symptoms. They may benefit. We do not need to re-trigger their experience, but they may be benefited from psychoeducational efforts to prevent future victimization or normalization, or develop positive self-image or parental education. And parents can be taught to identify signs of difficulty that can emerge at later developmental stages, which can increase probability of re-evaluation when appropriate. So now coming to treatment, what should treatment look like? Now, treatment can be individualized approach depending on the clinical presentation of child, the need of the child, the context in which treatment takes place. It can be multimodal, it can be family or group therapy, or addressing the family, or pharmacological and non-pharmacological, and it can be a different levels of care. It can be inpatient or partial admission or outpatient, depending on the particular need of the child and the family. Now, how should sexually abused children and adolescents be treated? Now, most of the times we have the knowledge, we are aware, the information is provided to us and reported to us, or we have inquired about it. But as clinician, we often find ourselves in a spot where we don't know what should be the words used, or how should be our body language, or what should we do immediately. So these are certain skills that we should look out for. We should have the primary aim is to bring the safety, providing a safe space. Now, when we talk about a therapist and a client, building a rapport, having a trust relationship, I think if we dive in deeper, safety is the bigger umbrella. So if somebody feels safe in your presence as an adult, the child feels safe in your presence and is not threatened by your adulthood or the authority or the place you are in, then that should be a good start. So make sure that you provide a safe space for the child. And you're attuned to that child. The attunement is important. Attunement is, let's say, a step ahead from being empathetic. Equally, your therapeutic presence is important. By therapeutic presence means that I am, as a therapist, fully present in that moment with the client, and there are absolutely no distractions, and I am I'm sailing together with the client, offering yourself fully to be present. So that is therapeutic presence. And containment techniques, for example, containment techniques have different meanings. For example, psychodynamically, we can say that therapist receives, holds, and transforms client's raw experiences, able to contain the raw experiences of the child without being anxious yourself. End goal is to restore the dignity and integrating the fragmented part of self, the sexually abused self, the self that is associated with that, and other part of self that we aim to restore. There should be no hurry in talking about the abuse. As a clinician, we should not be interested in what so happened and minute by minute detail of that incident. That is not important, but what the client brings into the session is what is important. So much potentially the therapeutic work can occur early in treatment without extensive discussion of the specifics of the abuse, because the more we talk about it, we are at a risk of even re-triggering and reenactment also. So we should be very careful that the safety is provided first and there's enough attunement with the client before we talk about specifics of the abuse. And we should also check with ourselves that whether that specific is important for you to know or not. So how should we respond to the abuse? There are multiple level of responses. So let's talk about first level responses. The first level responses is to bring in safety, and to bring in safety, there's a lot of need for rest, need for being grounded. So relaxation exercises are important, guided imagery, safe place imagery. Whenever I'm triggered, I should have some anchors to hold on to so that I can feel safe again. So that safe place imagery is important. Leisure and rest is important. Resuming daily routine and developmental activities, age appropriate, is important. And why it is important is because developing a structure or a routine or a schedule for a child, even for an adult, is important, but even for a child, it helps restore normalcy and balance. It helps restore predictability, and the child feels safe and has a sense of control over time and activities. So simple, basic things that we must suggest, no thought diary at this time, no detailed therapeutic intervention, but just eating, sleeping, family time, as simple as that. There's also a lot of times most of the times there is a lot of shame and guilt associated with CSA, and there is shame that is being brought out by people around us, and internally as well. So our identity is thwarted. So we must do certain identity exercises with the child to help him re-identify his self or restore his self, which means that it's important to give this message that I am is not equal to my abuse. This is just not the end of everything, though it is a very, very significant event that has happened in my life. But my whole notion of selfhood should not be colored by CSA. Present and future decisions stem from CSA identity, and world is a hostile place, and people are never to be trusted, and there's no place for intimate relationships. So these are the messages, it can develop into some core belief system that can become a part of core belief system in development of being an adult. So it is important that this messaging, this belief, is reworked at, and hence my previous self is not completely dissociated from my CSA and future self. The CSA should not be infused so much fused with future self. In fact, it can get reintegrated with my previous self, and hence I can think about my future self as well. So this Venn diagram shows that how we can draw the client from help the client from victimhood to selfhood, CSA being a part of the life, not the whole selfhood. There is certain abuse specific treatment. I don't have time to go into detail of, I have not made the presentation like that to be discussing one therapeutic modality, but just to give you an overview that how we must include parents in the treatment, because it helps preventing the re-victimization and normalizing the family functioning. Although the CSA must have happened with a particular individual, but how the family is affected, how that narrative is carried over with the whole by the whole family. The stigma, the shame is carried by the whole family. So there are certain behavioral strategies to manage externalizing symptoms, like we do for people with non-CSA otherwise. and how do we monitor children's symptoms at home, at school. So including parents, that's why it is important. And for anxiety and avoidance, we do gradual exposure and desensitization and relaxation training and cognitive restructuring. And for depressive symptoms, we could use coping skill training and correction of cognitive distortion. So one important aspect that I missed out here is that mostly people who have had traumatic instances, and especially CSA being the gravest, there is a hyper vigilance, because the child now feels that if I put my guard down, I will be subject to it again. So I must be vigilant or alert all the times to scan for the threat. So they're always in a fight or flight sort of a response. That's why bringing in safety and relaxation measures are important for us. Play therapy. Now, behavioral and cognitive strategies are important. However, therapies like play therapy are extremely helpful with CSA, because play is a natural way of expressing the childhood. The world of the child. They belong to that world where they reenact everything through play, and it brings in a lot of sense of security, control, and freedom of expression. So the play therapy can also be directed play therapy, where you create a situation that facilitates the similar situation, so that the anxiety of the child is given expression, and the similar situation is created through means of play. So that is directed play therapy. And then there is non-directed play therapy, which is basically child-centered play therapy based on Rogerian principles, which says that because Carl Rogers believed that children and individuals have an innate self-directed ability to adjust and grow as they choose how to deal with their experiences when they want to deal with it and how they want to deal with it. They have this innate sense. So we should allow that innate sense of free expression, and how it can be done is through non-directive play, and it can be facilitated via therapeutic relationship, where the child is sort of given the free play, and the therapist assume the Rogerian stance of genuineness and unconditional positive regard and all of that. So the child deals with it or processes it without being overwhelmed, and they deal with it in their own time. Now, this was about play therapy, cognitive and behavioral, and there are certain life skills by WHO laid out, which there are 10 core life skills which we can work with. I'll just skip through this slide, because then I'll just come to how do we teach children life skills. Now, life skill is not a one-to-one or a classroom sort of a skill program, but it can be done through conversations and discussions and encouraging opinion, debate, perspective taking, and not providing the value-based judgments, opinions, or answers. It can be done at school level and empower children with those skills so that they can identify. It is both curative and preventive. And some experiential methodologies that can come into place with CSAs, theater, again, expression of art, narrative therapy, building life stories and rewriting our life stories, and storytelling and artwork. These were about specific therapies. And then there is window approach to personal safety and child sexual abuse awareness. Samvad program specifically talks about this, where we teach kids body awareness. It's not just about good touch or bad touch. It is beyond that. It is much more than that. When we talk of body awareness, then we also talk about certain physical and general safety measures that they need to take out when they are out in the world. What is people safety? Keeping safe from unknown people. People safety, keeping safe from known people, and such. So I have divided next few slides as young children's concern and adolescent concerns. How much time do I have, if I may ask? And I can skip the preventive measure and I can come to the case vignettes and leave it open for discussion.
Savita man, how much time she has? I think it's 12:15. You can take another 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So basically to teach children and adolescents about people safety, how what should be the safety issues, what should they learn about safety issues pertaining to strangers and pertaining to people of their own in the community or known people, neighborhood, family. Yeah, and how known people can also be a threat to our safety and what are the signs to look out for and to ensure safety from harm that can come to us from known and unknown people. To learn about safe and unsafe secrets and how we should not keep unsafe secrets. Now that's very important when Aparna was talking about grooming. It's also a big part of it then that perpetrators groom children in a way that they make sure that they tell them that this is a secret between us two, and or if you let out this secret then I will harm one of your parents. So teaching them what is the harm in keeping unsafe secret is important. Teaching them privacy and boundaries, the concept of boundaries, to learn about personal boundaries in relation to safety, how much closeness I must keep with someone known or unknown, or how should I know from my own body when I'm feeling uncomfortable and what I must do. Similarly, with adolescent concerns, concept of privacy and boundary in social interaction and relationship, in engagement with importance of permission in relationship and engagement with people, that you have to voice it out that I give permission or allow you to sort of hug me or not hug me in certain situations, or who do I allow this to, and all of that. Helping them basically to understand and recognize various forms of coercion in relationship, like persuading someone to do something by force or threat. So coercion is that. How much to engage in decisions regarding physical intimacy and readiness. When are you ready? When you're not? When you must be ready? And what sort of intimacy? So that can be taught. That's it. So I'll quickly discuss three different, completely different looking case vignettes, which will give us an insight into how complex or how multi-layered the CSA issue can be. So there's this 13-year-old girl. Yes,
Prerna, can you wind up in about 2 minutes?
Yes, ma'am. This is my the last slides. Yeah. So a school going 13-year-old girl belonging to high social strata had emotional dysregulation, anger outburst, self-harm episode, borderline picture with impairment in areas of sense of self and in interpersonal relatedness, undergoing therapy. Due to impulsivity and poor judgment, she had already increased vulnerability and was subjected to abuse by a stranger who was an adult. Now, the legal issue was the perpetrator was in a different state outside Delhi. Personal level, the symptoms exacerbated and led to extreme maladjustment. At family level, the trauma resurfaced in mother because the mother has similar experience when she was of her daughter's age. And the family dynamics disrupted completely. So there was re-triggering of trauma with the mother. At social level, belonging to upper middle class family, stigma and shame was high. So led to inpatient treatment, and the treatment entailed safety, containment, family catharsis, and trauma retelling by mother, focusing on the developmental needs of the adolescent. 45-year-old laborer presented with severe headache, crying spells. Precipitating factor was allegedly sexual assault on 2 daughters while he was away to village. His 2 daughters were sexually assaulted for several days by people belonging to the same neighborhood, showing symptoms of withdrawn behavior, nightmares, flashbacks, poor sleep, and appetite. Now, the legal problem was that police refused to register a case and have turned the father down several times for FIR, and POSCO reporting is done for only younger. The adult one, they said that it was consensual. Personal problem was worsening of symptoms. At family level, whole family is experiencing vicarious trauma and subjected to maltreatment, not only by the community, but the different systems. Social problem was economic loss, stigma, future was bleak, and stigma by the neighborhood. Last slide and last case. 22-year-old female upper middle class family suffering from poor self-esteem, low confidence, anxiety, panic attack, diagnosed with GAD. Treatment included pharmacological and psychotherapeutic management. During the middle phase of therapy, she dissociated in the session and started laughing inappropriately, what is called as abreaction. Catharsis was facilitated, and she expressed that when she was 17 years old, she was assaulted by the family pandit that the family trusted and consulted for many years. He recommended some puja for her academic performance in boards, and the havan was to be done in her bedroom where she was assaulted. She had almost repressed this memory, but often had panic attacks in her room and was not able to sleep in her bedroom. During the lockdown, the symptoms exacerbated, and she was spending a lot of time inside. Focus shifted in therapy from treating anxiety to treating trauma. So the basic guiding, so these three can tell us about the multi-headed hydra problem of CSA, and the guiding principles should be the 3 points: that what is the land of the law, what are the code of ethics that we practice, and what is the best interest of the person in front of us. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You can stop your screen share.
Yes.
Dr. Pankaj Verma and Naresh, would you like to conduct further the question answer
Yeah,
session?
Yeah, you
Comment?
can unmute
Yeah.
yourself. I've allowed everyone to unmute themselves. So,
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. Excellent information and session. And again, since it is very sensitive area, so all of us, we connect with several clients, kids, their family, whosoever we have seen in our lifetime. So that's why it is quoted as a whole body trauma. It is not sexual trauma. It is from all these side people are affected. And I would not say vicarious, because it is direct to the child, direct to the family, and yes, to direct to the healers as well, listening and sitting in this platform. Questions are there. I'll advise, because already Aparna has started answering. So ma'am, both the ways we are happy to, because initial opening question was Dr. Shruti Srivastav, that what about the one-stop center services existing in Rajasthan or in India? So Prerna and Aparna, sorry, please start answering. Thank you.
So I guess Rajasthan, I don't know, but one-stop centers are still working in different parts of Delhi. So there are centers affiliated in the hospital. So IHBAS also has one-stop center where with the 10-bedded facilities also is there. So if the patient is basically not having any psychological or something which does not need an inpatient care, a proper safe haven and psychological care is also provided at the one-stop centers in our institute.
Regarding Rajasthan, services are patchy like most of the states. And when we go to the management of psychological part, then again, these services are also not that efficient. One, they don't come to us, but second, most of people are not trained to deliver, or maybe the follow-up liaison. So that is largely missing in most of part of India. You're muted, Aparna.
Hello. Yeah. We had a beautiful presentation from both the speakers. I think we can unmute everyone and invite oral questions also.
Yeah, I've allowed
So there are
everyone to unmute
questions in the
themselves
chat
already.
box. There are questions in the chat box. Dr. Aparna and Dr. Prerna will
I'm just looking
start
at the
answering.
questions, sir. Yes.
Please,
So
please. Thank you.
for functioning. So somebody asked about how we can participate in Samvad about training. I guess you can write them a mail and request them. They conduct regular training sessions, and if you're affiliated with the institute, they actually send mails regarding upcoming ones. Or if you're interested, you can actually mail at Samvad. They have their website and the mail where you can contact them, I guess, and request for the same. They also have online webinar and web sessions that were conducted earlier also. Okay. Dr. Shruti has asked
Yes.
emergency medical intervention, no documentation. What I meant was that patient needs emergency medical intervention, documentation like legal or medical legal document or any FIR or something like that is not exactly needed to provide any intervention but obviously documentation from the side of the doctors has to be done. So that is different.
Dr.
Okay,
Majid has raised his hand. Dr. Majid, please, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Vishal. First of all, compliments to DPS for organizing this wonderful event. Vishal bhai, Pankaj bhai, and Manishri and team. And secondly, the names seem to sound similar, Prerna and Aparna. So wonderful presentations, both of you. I think very, very difficult topics, and you have made them so simple. I had to share one experience that was around 1 month back. I saw one of the patients who was around 17 years of age, mild to moderate mental retardation, and she was unfortunately sexually abused, and she got pregnant because of that in around June, July. So she was 3 months pregnant once she came to us. And then somehow, how did she come to us? She was, the termination was tried in the rural area where she resides, and it was unsuccessful. There was some complication, and she landed up in our gynae ward, in our obstetric ward. So she was terminated, and subsequently, the father and mother came to us. They are the only people looking after her. 2 other sisters of the same patient are married. And they told us, sir, ye iska dusra incident hai. 2 years back, again, a person who was intoxicated had raped her, and she was pregnant that time, but us waqt baat tal gayi, humne 1-1.5 mahine ke baad hi iska termination kiya. So what they wanted from us is that, as psychiatrists, you write that she is mild to moderate mental retardation. She is not in, her judgment is not good, and other cognitive domains are not good. She will not be able to get married. And you write down, we'll go for hysterectomy of the same, because we are old people, both husband and wife. We cannot look after. We have to go for grazing, and we have to go for looking after our rest of the issues. So it was a difficult, because we could not as such write down anything like this on the paper that please go for permanent sterilization. Then somehow we have been called by the court of law to tell us what is the status. So the hearing is on 20th of September, coming next 3 days. I want people across this panel to respond that how should we go, because I'm really feeling and apprehensive that judge may ask me, is this the one of the reasons to go for permanent sterilization in people where the caretaking is very poor, because we don't have centers here while such children are taken care of. So how to go about it? It's a difficult situation for me also, as an expert witness, going into court and telling that whether the sterilization could be one of the options to protect this female from getting pregnant again and again.
Yeah, I think, Dr. Majid, you present a very difficult situation, but it's not the first time we have seen patients with mental retardation having come with this kind of a situation, and family asking for sterilization. I think legally, if the IQ, it depends on the IQ level. If her IQ is moderate or below, that means below 50, IQ below 50, then in that case, that the patient cannot exercise judgment, cannot take care of herself, cannot protect herself, cannot give consent, cannot even complain or something. If the patient cannot, then in that case, a recommendation can be made. But I think the family's consent is necessary, and the patient may not be able to give a judgment. So legally, the patient's capacity to give informed consent has to be documented, that she's not able to do this, and somebody has to take decision in her place. But on the other hand, I think these child sex abuse, this has become such a common and a problem we very often encounter in our clinics. And first and foremost difficulty is about reporting. Family immediately, when you discover it, when the patient shares with you, family immediately does not want it to be reported to police because it has repercussions, social, familial, and so on. And many a times these are a very close family member or a very close relative or a close friend who's the perpetrator. And the process of reporting is not simply that on the first instance itself, you have to call the police. We have seen in our clinical practice, the moment we say that it requires to be reported to the police, the patient and family immediately, they try to run away from the hospital. They leave their record and card and everything, they just disappear. And so then we learn that we need to go slow and gradually, prepare the patient and family, empower them to understand and explain to them the process and what is necessary and so on. So what is important is the protection of the child for future and separation of the child from perpetrator. That means taking the child into protection and separating from the perpetrator and that environment. And then, of course, deal with the psychological process of trauma counseling and healing and stress and distress and so on. That is the third level of intervention that is there. It's a very involved process. It's very time consuming. It's difficult. You need to bring the family on board, and family, it takes a great deal of time. And then once after reporting, making a police complaint, the legal process starts. Then the other set of difficulties start. There's the investigation, the investigating officer who ought to be a woman and investigate in a certain way. And that in itself is not only traumatizing but very complex and very, very hurtful for the patient to go through that. And then the legal process is that the questioning of the child, recreating the trauma and everything. Although the POSCO makes provision for protecting the child against the recreating of trauma, it is to be kind of investigated in patient's home by a police woman who is not less than of a inspector level and in plain clothes and so on and so forth. But still, in real life, we still have difficulties at this level. There aren't many women police officers available, and it delays the process. These are the practical difficulties. And then also the other side always says that this was consensual. And then age of consent. There was this whole issue of age of consent, whether currently it's 18, so whether it should be lowered to 16, to 15, to 14, to whatever. I think there's a huge problem and issue of determining age of consent, and the societal pressure, or even some lobbies are pressurizing that the age of consent should be lowered for a sexual relationship. There are communities who say that a 14-year girl can be married, and they want age of consent and age of marriage to be reduced to 14 years. I think and this, by giving, putting a legal stamp on this, we will be legalizing and, making the sexual activity at the 14 years, 13 years valid and legal. I think these are very, very difficult issues and problematic issues for us, the psychiatrists and psychologists. Should we allow this, and should we make some kind of a submission or have some kind of an opinion or a voice about what should be the minimum legal age of consent, minimum legal age of marriage from psychological developmental perspective and from mental health point of view, not succumbing to the lobbies and pressures and so on and so forth. So there's a whole lot of legal questions are involved in this. We get dragged into. And but I think for us as psychiatrists, our role basically to take care of the psychological aspects of the trauma to the child. And Prerna has presented in detail about the approaches and therapies and so on. But it takes a lot of time, and the families are usually, in my experience, I have seen they are not able to sustain through, all this. And once this kind of a thing happens, the families are, I've seen, getting devastated. So I will stop here and request if Dr. Naresh and Dr. Pankaj would like to make any comments.
Yeah,
Ma'am, there are some questions in the chat box. I guess quickly
Okay.
they can answer, or
Yeah.
I can add in the part as ever Dr. Aparna, Dr. Prerna wishes. One is about the Samvad. As somebody asked, what is this? This is an initiative under the Women and Child Development Ministry. It's a NIMANS, and the key person is Dr. Shekhar Seshadri sir. And as the name suggests, it is an acronym: Support, Advocacy, and Mental Health Interventions for Children in vulnerable circumstances and distress. And somebody asked how to approach. They are going to organize another 12 days program, in-house program, in coming months. So somebody can write email to Sheshadri sir. Otherwise, they're sent to institutions or some other government institution, but they fund the travel, and it is one of the nice program. So, and again, one person has mentioned how to address these all needs in the OPD. So one should be cognizant that these are the needs, and one should read the clinical practice guidelines published in 2019 by the same group, Sheshadri sir and Sheila madam, who is working in this area for almost 2 to 3 decades. So it's a wonderful CPG published under Child and Adolescent section by the same group who is delivering Samvad.
Okay. There are guidelines also available on the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare website. So I would suggest that everybody should look into those guidelines, and it has a very clearly stated how should you approach to the patient, both clinically, legally, and psychologically. And they have given these steps. I think it was from Dr. Sheshadri sir only. They have incorporated from there only. Or maybe it is the same guidelines which they have prepared. So one has to read it. Ma'am, what I find is there are two most difficult things. When patient is brought to us, it is either by the police or some social welfare or CWC. So they are already reported cases. But once the other scenario is when patient comes to us with the other psychiatric symptoms, and then they disclose it to us. That is the time what I'm finding in my department. The people are very reluctant to report. They say this has happened 5 years back, this has happened 2 years back, and they have not gone to the police. I would like that Dr. Aparna or anybody should make a clear point on this, whether the delayed FIR, delayed this thing can be done or not. How should we approach to a case where this has happened? Like I'll give you an example. One of the case which reported to us, she was already in college and a major, but her assault happened when she was appearing for the 10th. And she reported to the father, but father and the family, they just tried to hush the matter, and the tuition teacher who was doing this was removed. That's it. But that lady was having this problem throughout her 11th, 12th, and the college days. And then she took things in her hand, and then she came to us. And she did not disclose to us in the first meeting. It was on the third or fourth meeting when she disclosed it to us. And then we called the father, we explained, then they reported it to the police. But most of the times, psychiatrists who are sitting in the OPD, they are reluctant to report. So what should be done? Dr. Aparna.
Can I add a question to that?
Yeah, sure.
So since I've read of POSCO, I've seen this POSCO, and I know if you look at how the system works, is it really a practical law? That's my first question, at very basic. Is it really a practical law? Because even if, let's say, even if you remove the child from the custody of the parents or from their table, where will the child go? You tell me. I'm going even ahead, where is it very difficult? That's the biggest difficult. The problem is we have adopted a lot of Western laws without having that infrastructure in place and hoping the infrastructure will come. It's hope only. Like MHCA. MHCA, the only onus is on us as psychiatrists, and there's no onus on anybody else. So this is very disappointing for me whenever I see these copy-paste laws in India. We have no standing in the. It's good to create awareness. It's good to have a samvad, like samvad we're doing now also. Good to create awareness. Very good. We should tell children good touch and bad touch and work at the preventive level. That's very good. But at the action level, do we really have the infrastructure to do all this? That's my biggest worry. That aside, I like something what Prerna said. Two things I learned from her. One was the sleeper effect. That was very, very nice and very, very interesting. I think that was a very, very good takeaway from today's academic session for me. There was another thing which I forgot because of this being upset about the law. Because I can ask here also, if you can do a simple head count or hand count on how many people here have really reported a case in POSCO. नहीं आप तो गवर्नमेंट में हो बाकी प्राइवेट में अगर किसने किया हो और एनीबडी एल्स इट्स रियली
हमने गवर्नमेंट में भी कोशिश किया लेकिन पेशेंट भाग गया चले गए छोड़ करके हम कर नहीं पाए हम
that's exactly ma'am that's because ma'am they know it's like same it is similar to that law.
Mandatory reporting by a doctor is not easy and not possible. That is one. And secondly, removing the child away from that home and environment and alternative, even the foster care or the child care homes or such, they are, number one, don't exist. Number two, even if they are even a worse of option.
Yeah.
Worse than the abusive environment. They are not better in any way. So that's why I said the families I have seen getting devastated because there is no possible alternative for them to to this at redressal in our Indian system. Western system, as you say, Vishal, with the copy-paste laws and all that, in Western system, they take the child away, put them in homes and foster care and so on and so forth. But even there, you look at the development and growth of those children. I mean, what happens to them? We have seen, but not just through POSCO, but then other like these examples of our Mrs. Banerjee and these Abhigyan and Aishwarya and taken away by the social service and put in foster care, and look at what happens to those children. So we have no better alternative, no good or ideal or good alternative for that. But nevertheless, moving away from the environment is fine. But I think I agree with you, the impracticality of the legal system.
So my humble submission is this: what I have, what we can do, what I have tried, is not everybody is abuser in the family, and thankfully Indian families are a little big. So let's say a father is an abuser, the mother is not, or there is a bua, or there is a chacha, or there is a mama or somebody, and we can involve them and tell them to take the child away, and also appeal to the good self of father and see, or whoever, that you confront the abuser, or if the person is the abuser, confront and talk to that person, at a family level. I think that is the best way, I think, in the cultural setting and the infrastructure we have to manage the child. It's easier said than done, but I think this is an effort. Instead of this is a good effort, and it'll bring better dividends or better benefits. That's my humble submission. Definitely I can be pronounced wrong and pointed out, but this is what I think.
I wish to add, sir, here in response to the whole discussion. My first case which I have seen with child sexual abuse, that was my second year of residency under Savita Malhotra madam only. there the reporting was not a problem because the case was 12-year-old girl who already came after the report of the rape and the notice of the governor in Chandigarh. And their mother was no more because she died a couple of years. Father was drinker, and the some or other way system was contributing. We have rehabilitated to her in some organization in Chandigarh only. It was difficult experience, but it still went well. And yes, it is the mental health professionals to look after as well as suggest where the child should be. Safety is primary concern, and then there's a larger family. Smaller number are incest, but otherwise people are known to the child in the larger cases. Yes, we know. And as per this Samvad, it is 7-step approach. Even the child as well as family is refusing. Even child's yes is also important. Then the first is psychological management, psychosocial management. And even after the 7th step, still the child and family are refusing. We are not bound as per Samvad. As per the act, we are bound. And not only we, everyone is bound. So not it is health professional. Everyone comes in the notice to anyone, all blanket statement, not a mental health professional. And yes, as per Sheshadri sir and the team, still the child is not accepting to report. And then the risk of abuse is very less. We should document and go ahead, but psychosocial management is must. In case of the high risk, because the perpetrator is there only, all the system is there, then beyond whatever we need to report because the protection. Act has not sentenced to anyone in his memory till last year, any people that why didn't you report under POSCO, it is mandatory. No one has been accused of that. And the very important good part of the act, there's no timeline. There's no timeline given that within a month, within a year, one should mandatorily report. But first and foremost is psychosocial care, overall management. Thank you.
So very good. I think what Naresh has rightly pointed out, we should, as our mental health professional, should focus on psychosocial rehabilitation of the child, try and remove the child away from the perpetrator. And the child is a teenager, strengthen the child to say no, to stand up against the abuse. Because a lot of times children do not say anything. Pata nahi kya bolenge, kya papa kya kahenge, mama kya kahenge. So they should stand. If they say no to the perpetrator, most of the time perpetrators run away. They are scared people.
All right. I think the last comment, Aparna, would you like to say something? Last comment.
Okay,
In this
so
discussion?
as rightly said by Dr. Naresh and Vishal sir, the law, there are impracticalities in law. So yes, that's agreed. There are questions which are unanswered, which are foundations which are made on us or all of the society, and the child has to get up and say no. It's also that the agencies, we are working at school and schools are not ready to take the responsibilities also to report at times. So all probably should be responsible and make a joint effort in making this possible that the CSA is, the public health concern is addressed.
Yeah. I think thank you very much. This was a wonderful session. Very evocative, thought-provoking, and never easy to discuss and never conclusive. You never can have a conclusive answers or solutions that come up. Still in the process, we are learning, we are building, and we are working together. And I'd like to thank Dr. Aparna and Dr. Prerna for the wonderful presentations. And Dr. Vishal, Dr. Manushri, Dr. Pankaj, and the entire DPS team for organizing this session and for having us over here. And I also thank you on behalf of Dr. Pankaj Verma and Dr. Naresh Navinani, my co-chairs. It was a pleasure working today. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you all.
Thank you
And many
for
thanks to
being
DPS.
such graceful chairpersons, ma'am. I think we
Thank
also learned how to conduct a session. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you so
okay.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone
ma'am.
for a wonderful,
Thank you.
wonderful session.
Yes.
I already put in the message. I will save this session and upload it on YouTube and share the link on the groups. Or if anybody is not in the group, please message me on my number. Thank you everyone for joining.